Welcome to Beyond Food and Wine, a Cordon Bleu podcast. In this podcast, we get some real insight into the food and hospitality industry from a variety of renowned chefs, industry experts, and Le Cordon Bleu alumni. Join us as we hear the fascinating stories and unique experiences behind some of the best-known names in the industry. Hello and welcome. Today I'm delighted to be joined by alumni and baker Georgia Green. Georgia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Such an honour to be on this podcast.
It's absolutely our pleasure and our honour. It's so lovely to welcome alumni back and catch up on what they've been doing. And we are very excited to explore that with you today.
Me too.
So, Georgia, can you first of all tell us a little bit about your background for those who aren't aware of your career and your journey? Just tell us a little bit about what brought you to the career that you have now.
Wow. I'll try and summarise it. I would say I am essentially a cake maker, cake designer, who started off at Le Cordon Bleu. Went into working in a couple of places, then started selling cakes privately, opened my business, Georgia's Cakes, in 2015, sold cakes to clients, weddings, other celebrations, then opened a YouTube channel, got into teaching, taught in-person group workshops, and carried on my online content, YouTube, Instagram, etc. Which is fast forwarding to today, where I would actually say I'm a cake designer and cake mentor and tutor as well. I'm known as Georgia's Cakes, even though I'm Georgia Green. But the name stuck, and that's how people refer me to, even if they meet me face to face. Very quick summary.
No, that's
we'll get into details.
Yeah, it's a lot to explore, and I think it's quite interesting as we don't see too many who have gone down the sort of YouTube route in our alumni specifically, and I wonder, do you think that is the future? Not necessarily YouTube specifically, but obviously video in general and TikTok and those sorts of platforms. I think maybe you were slightly ahead of your time with that. And do you think is that what you're telling your mentees that they really need to do, is kind of do the video content?
I think it's a really good question, because someone asked me the other day, like, are you still doing what you love doing? And I'm essentially more a video editor than anything at the moment, but that's the path that I decided and I excelled in, and I guess I fell into as well. I know once someone has professional training, one would want to go and work in a working kitchen, restaurant, bakery, hotel, open something themselves, which is definitely more on the physical side. However, nowadays, I think, I don't know what percentage we're talking about, but most of the marketing and part of the job is definitely through these online social channels. And I think it's a must-have. Fortunately and unfortunately, some people may find it more natural to do, while others may have to hire it externally, and obviously it's this extra expense that they weren't thinking about originally, etc. So I'm not saying you have to be a YouTube star in order to make it in this field at all. But if you did want to open a business or excel in the field, it's almost worth having it as more of a portfolio more than anything, which is actually how my Instagram started. It was my portfolio of work. It's just a bit different now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly right. If you want to build any kind of brand for yourself, then the social side of things is an absolute must have, and it's absolutely okay to just work somewhere and be an amazing pastry chef or chef or cake decorator or whatever, but establishing your own brand, it's a requirement that, you need to kind of understand that marketing side of things.
Exactly. I mean, it's an incredible tool. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
I I have put money behind social media every now and then to boost certain things, but in
Yeah.
general, it's a free tool. You obviously
Yeah,
have to put the work in, and it's how I got to where I am today.
absolutely. Well, thank you for being quite candid about that. I appreciate that. Now, moving on a little bit, I would just love to know what brought you to the decision to come to Le Cordon Bleu specifically.
So let's rewind. I think it's been 10 years since I actually left, which sounds crazy.
Yes, I checked. It was you graduated in 2013, which does
Yes.
seem like it's too long ago, but it's not that long
Wow.
ago, really.
Well, it is and it isn't. I still feel the age that I left the school, to be honest. But let's go before that. So I've come from a very artistic background
Mm,
in my family. It started with my grandma was actually an artist and a dressmaker.
wow.
My mum is by training a graphic designer. My dad's an architect. My sister's a fashion designer. So art and artistic things were very much present in my upbringing,
Mm.
and luckily inherited the talent as well. The I guess the issue with when you're when you're an artist is there's so many different paths you can take. It's
Yeah,
not just you're an artist, you paint paintings. There's hundreds of fields that you can go into, and all under the same umbrella.
yeah.
Um, so what I found during school is that I excelled in art and maths.
Mm.
And because my dad was an architect, I thought it would be the sensible decision
Sure.
to become an architect.
Mhm.
The only issue is that I couldn't care less about buildings. I think I could appreciate the beauty of an old building and
Mm.
appreciate the crazy new design or something modern, but to
Yeah.
start learning about light fittings and learning for 7 years was not really my passion, let's say.
Mm.
So what I ended up doing was an art foundation year, which I did in Leeds College of Art. Um, and for those listening and don't know what an art foundation is, it's basically a year before uni, after school, after you finish sixth form,
Mhm.
where you can kind of explore a few different fields within the art um, industry and then specialize in one. So I got to Leeds and I was exposed to I can't actually remember the different groups, but there's like fine arts, there's
Mm.
like not design technology. I'm thinking of school now, but more graphic design. That was it, graphic design, and then there's the fashion. But within those, there are so many different avenues. Like for
Yeah,
example, fine
absolutely.
art could be sculpturing, it could be painting, it could be, and then fashion, it's fashion design, costume, textiles, graphics, you've got digital, you've got and like, all sorts. Anyway, so I was like, I think I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Um, but what I ended up, I did try fashion, and I'm just like, it just doesn't come as natural to me. Um, and I ended up in like the graphic area. And my issue when it comes to art is that I draw very cartoon like. I always draw cartoons, and
Yeah.
everything's got a big, thick black outline, and make it very caricaturesque, if that's a
Yeah.
word. Um, anyway, and I was thinking, okay, well, a few months into the course, you kind of have to decide what you do to start working on your final project. And then I think at the same time, my mum actually bought me a book on animation and stop
Mm.
motion. And I started to realize, also being in Leeds and reading through this book, I was like, oh my gosh, animation is actually a job and a career.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And at the time, I was like, oh my God, can you imagine if I like get a job at Disney? That would just be the best thing ever. Anyway, moving swiftly on, I ended up specializing in animation. Funnily enough, my final project at Leeds was me presenting a cooking show, and all the food is animated. So
Wow.
it was this twisted. I kind of went towards the dark humor, which isn't actually very
Mm.
me, but like I made like a lemon tart, and I was like, now you grate the lemon, and then the lemon grating was like screaming, and like I was torturing this food. I don't really know how I got there. Anyway, but it was kind of this like funny contrast of like this perfect home cook, and then like you're
Yeah.
torturing this food. Anyway, so I think it's funny to reflect on that now, because I'm like, oh, that's actually exactly what I do now, but obviously just with real food and not
Yeah.
animation. Anyway, so I finished my foundation and then got a place at the University of Arts London in, I've gone blank. It's the one in Elephant and Castle. Can't remember. My gosh, I've gone blank. It's not Camberwell. Okay, we can skip that bit. So I got a place at the University of Arts London to do animation. And my first day there, I think it was a bit of a shock. There was 4 girls and 15 to 20 boys,
Wow.
and most people were gamers.
Right. Yeah.
And it kind of made me realize what the animation world is actually all about. It's not Disney princesses and Disneyland. It's
Yeah.
like actually like you have to be very good at computers, because obviously everything is on computer now. Long gone are the days of hand-drawn animations. You can do some sort of stop motion, like even Wallace and Gromit, for example, that started off as
Yeah.
plasticine, but now it's all computer animated. So there were a couple of fine artists there, which I really appreciated their work. Anyway, so it kind of shocked me from day one. And I guess it started there, where I was like, well, I'm here. What can I do to kind of make this time go enjoyably? I must look for other things to do at the same time.
Yeah.
And started cooking and baking, kind of continuing from my animation. It was never like a big part of my life. It's not like I can say that I baked all my life.
Yeah.
I did things here and there. I used to do baking with my younger brother and sister, just to like as an afternoon activity, but it wasn't like from scratch. It started of those, like the instant mixes that you can get in the supermarket in the box. And like, oh, they saw a Thomas the Tank Engine cupcakes. Okay, let's do that this afternoon. Anyway, and then I guess like also with watching like things like MasterChef, Bake Off, I started to really enjoy watching food being made, and then I decided to create it myself on the side of my animation course. It got to like halfway through the first year where I was almost dreading going in every day. And one of my friends at the time was said, Georgia, like, you don't seem very happy. And I was like, well, no, like, I don't really want to be here. And I asked her, like, do you like it? She's like, I love it. I can't wait to come in every day. And I was like, okay, something has to be done. I'm obviously not in the right place. Anyway, so I can't actually remember where I found Cordon Bleu or where I had heard of it, but I think I signed up to a newsletter, and then I got an email or something in the post about an open day, kind of around the same time. And I was like, I'm going to go. Like, why not? Let's just see. Anyway, I remember I had to be at college that day, and I officially bunked a day to go to Cordon Bleu. And I walked in, and I think very cartoon like my eyes popped out, my jaw dropped on the floor, and like that was my face the whole time walking around the school. I was just like, I can't believe this world exists, and I can't believe that like there is an option to do this as a career. And I remember going through the school and like walking past the windows and seeing the working kitchens, and then watching a demonstration with the reflective mirrors so the audience can see what's going on. And I like got this thrill that I had never experienced in anything I had done to this point. The only issue here was that I kind of changed my mind 100 times by this point. I had to face telling my parents that I like really wasn't happy and I wanted to change again, but I managed to convince them, and I sought out the year at animation. Just in my mind, I'm like, I want to complete something. So I didn't get a degree or anything, but I did a year, and to me that was good enough. And then enrolled to Cordon Bleu basic patisserie. And I only enrolled for the basic course at first because I didn't want too long a commitment just
Yeah.
in case, based on my previous decision
Yes.
making. But pretty much never looked back since that first day. And yeah, that's my
Fantastic.
story to get to the school.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's horrible that you kind of went through, that experience of being so unhappy with what you'd chosen to do. And I think probably it does happen to a lot of people. And, it's just so fortunate that you did end up finding your niche and the way that you could express yourself the way you wanted to.
Yeah, I think I was very lucky to have realized it at the
Yeah.
time. I'm also, I guess, lucky because I don't think age. I think you can go into it at any age, to be honest.
Yeah.
In my class at the school, there was all sorts of people from all walks of life.
Mm.
But I think I was lucky that I hadn't, gone to uni for 3 years, done a degree, and then made the decision. And it kind of like just
Yeah.
delayed the process a little bit more. But yeah, it was the best decision. Best decision.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear it.
Mm.
So obviously you had the kind of artistic flair, and you just needed that kind of create, the edge with your skill set. Do you think that your time at Le Cordon Bleu filled that gap for you?
Absolutely. I think I hadn't done anything like it before. I
Mm.
think I was still somewhat trying to find my niche in the art world.
Yeah.
And to do it with food was just a bonus. And
Mm.
I guess you can create things, and specifically patisserie, because obviously savory food can also look beautiful, but I think
Yeah.
patisserie just has this extra artistic touch to it in my
Yeah.
mind. And you also have like the creativity and the eye, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think during the course I found my creative flair, and
Mm.
that's how I was able to express my creativity. And I always have to say it's for me because obviously everyone's different.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
Someone who's amazing at fine arts may not find that in baking a cake or doing something patisserie related. But anyway, so for me, it just fits so well.
Yeah. I think what's so interesting about um cakes and creativity, and there's so much, you can do with that as a medium, is that it's an expression of all of the above, everything you've mentioned previously: architecture, fashion, fine art, even, sculptural elements.
Hmm.
You can do it with, you know, with the sponges and the chocolate and the sugar art and all of,
Yeah,
any of that kind of any of those tools, any of those materials, you can kind of fit it into those categories. And
exactly.
maybe that's what makes it, yeah, such a great medium and so good for you specifically, because you have all of these different influences coming from different sides, different parts of your life and your family, and you're kind of able to incorporate all of them. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that's what makes this world so exciting, is that the possibilities are truly endless.
Mm,
Like at the moment, I'm playing around with like painting with buttercream, and I'm using a
yeah.
palette knife. And I'm like, a part of me actually wants to try the same technique with paint on a canvas and see how, I'm color matching, I'm creating textures, I'm really
Mm.
understanding the materials being used. Like I said before, it just so happens to be edible, which is the fun bit. And when you're talking about sculpturing, like I actually went to a ceramics class and I was sculpturing with clay, and I've fallen
Oh
in love with
wow.
that now. And then I actually applied it to cake because I found a consistency of ganache that you can kind of sculpt with,
Wow.
blushed it with a bronze powder, and I did this figurine of a woman out of cake. And I was like, this
Amazing.
is just, and like, it's just, I have so much fun with exploring new things. And I
Mm.
think that's why I haven't got bored of it, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what do you think of the is it real or is it cake trend?
So I love it, and I love watching it because I don't do that sort of cake,
Yeah,
those
yeah.
sort of cakes. Um, Funnily enough, I actually started off with sugar paste and fondant, especially after learning it at the school, because I think we did like a 2-day class of cake decorating, and we did
Yeah.
I remember the fruit cake, and I did 2 tiers because I didn't have a partner. So they
Ah,
allowed me to make two. Everyone else only did one.
fantastic.
And I did a few flowers, and then I kind of presumed that's what cakes were. Well, we're talking 10 years ago as well. So
Well,
it's kind of
exactly.
what,
Yeah.
yeah, we were still very much used to like the very novelty cakes, which are still, I suppose, somewhat in fashion. If a 5-year-old wants a frozen themed cake, it's usually made of
Mm.
fondant, and all the modeling and everything. And when I started to make cakes for people, I automatically went down the fondant route.
Yeah.
Um, but that didn't come naturally to me. And it
Yeah.
was only like after about a year of playing around and then kind of revisiting what I had learned at the school, did I then create a more unique style without fondant and just using buttercream and
Mm.
um I wouldn't say ingredients. The decorations were like edible decorations, things like I
Mm.
made macarons because I learned them at school. I made meringue kisses. I used fresh flowers or torched Italian meringue. And
Mm.
that's kind of how I developed my style initially.
Yeah, just a kind of, amalgamation of all the various different techniques that you learned. And I love that style of cake. I think it's really nice with the, all the little touches. And my
Hmm.
my preference is not, I don't particularly rate the kind of fondant. I think you have to be very, very good to make fondant look good on a cake.
Yes.
And a
Yeah.
lot of people don't have that knack. No shade, but just
No shade.
an
It's
observation.
it's very, you know what, it's really difficult to work
Mm,
with, and I give it to the people who use it because I don't have the patience, and that's why I didn't go down that
mm.
route. Because it's not that I'm scared of a challenge. Trust me, cake decorating as a whole is probably one of the hardest things to do. But it didn't come naturally to me, and I
Yeah.
didn't want to produce work that I wasn't satisfied with. I
No,
think
of
that's how
course.
I took myself away from that. But you can get gorgeous fondant cakes, don't get me wrong.
Oh,
But for me, it
absolutely.
felt
Yeah.
more natural to do the buttercream way.
Absolutely. So before we move on to the big news, I just want to quickly ask you um, about your celebrity, your A-list clients that you've had, and what that was like, and when you kind of were first approached to do a kind of high-profile client's cake, were you quite rattled by that, or was it just kind of like business as usual?
It's actually a good question. Because I don't get, I would say, phased slash nervous from
Mm.
big celebrities. I think
Yeah.
if I'm a fangirl of someone, I'll get excited.
Yeah.
But for example, my first one of the first cakes I did when I was actually doing fondant ended up being served to Cara Delevingne, and I think that was my big, I would say, the big break at the beginning.
Mm.
And it all happened at a good time. Instagram was kind of up and coming. I got on there quite quickly, hence the name George's Cakes. It was made in a rush because I had to open an account and I didn't know what to call it. So I was
Right.
just like, George's Cakes, and then it stuck. um, my younger sister, who's 4 years younger than me,
Mm.
um, told me about Instagram. I didn't actually know about it. And she was explaining what a hashtag was and how to
Mm.
tag people. And I must have had about 10 cakes on my page at the time, um, before I got asked to do the cake for Cara. And
Mm.
I think because I was just like focused on building my own business up, I still had a full time job at a cafe and I was doing cakes on the side. But this job came through, well, now my brother in law's sister.
Mhm.
She worked in fashion. She was working at a PR agency, and they were doing this event for DKNY featuring Cara. There's a long
Mhm.
trail of connections. And she just jumped at the opportunity. She was like, Georgia, this will be amazing. We can get Cara to tag you. And I was like, I was a bit like, who's Cara? What's tag? And it's like, oh, Cara is this like massive, famous model. Everyone, and I was like, oh no, I think I've seen her in an ad. I was very
Mm.
much like in my kitchen, in my own world. I'm not really like following how I do now because
Yeah.
social media wasn't as it is now. Anyway, so I made a cake, and it was a difficult cake. It was like in the shape of a jacket, which was one of the products of the line.
Right.
And to be honest, looking back on it, I can't believe I served that to Cara because I could do so much better now. But nevertheless, I made the cake. I remember I've actually just had a flashback. I was in a cab, and
Mm.
because I was still kind of new to decorating, I didn't have a box big enough. And so
Oh
I took
God.
this cake in my hands in the cab. And like I don't know how it got there. But it did. And the one thing which my sister kept saying, just going, make sure you're the one to give it to her and make sure she writes your name down, like your
Mhm.
Instagram. And I did. It was like lots of paparazzi at this event. I think only a certain amount of people were able to come. She came in, and then the girl who got me the job basically said, like, come now. And I literally presented Cara with this cake. And there is actually a photo of her face when she saw it, which is
Oh, brilliant.
great. And then it was kind of rush, rush, rush. And I was like, can you tag me? And I didn't even believe what I was saying because I didn't still really understand the concept. She
Yeah.
goes, yep. And she whipped out her phone, wrote my name down, and that was it. And I was like, okay, I've done my bit. And then actually what happened is she went upstairs in the shop and I was able to follow her with the cake and cut her a piece.
Mm.
And she took a photo of me cutting the slice out of the cake. And that was the photo she then later that day put up on her own Instagram. And at the time, I think she had
Wow.
like 3 million followers, which was a lot back
Yeah.
then. I
Yeah.
think now she's like hundreds of millions or whatever.
Mm.
And that day I jumped from like 400 followers to like 8,000. So much so my phone actually ran out of battery because of the notifications. And so that was the first jump. That was the firstly celebrity client. I
Yeah.
guess looking back, it was a lot of pressure. And she, believe it or not, she did actually eat the cake. Models eat
Excellent.
cake.
Good. Good.
And
Glad to hear it.
I had that boost, and then I had all of a sudden had all these followers to kind of look after slash show off my work, promote myself. And
Mm.
so I kind of had quite a quick fast track start in the world of Instagram back then.
Yeah.
And it just continued from there, which led to even more opportunities. And I did lots of work with quite high-end brands,
Yeah.
who I mean, there's actually quite a few. And just like, for example, when Lancome wanted to promote one of their lipsticks, they ordered a few cakes from me that went out to certain people.
Mm.
And they were constantly sharing the photos and tagging me on Instagram. So, and this happened a few times during the years. But it was very much like still order cakes from Georgia to go out. Less about me, more about my cakes, which
Yeah.
then changed later on. And then in 2018, this was like the big one. I just got this email going, hi, I'm looking for a cake to be made. I can't tell you more
Mm.
than that unless you sign an NDA. And then all I noticed was the email was from someone with the signature of Fenty, the beauty
Oh,
brand, which is by
yeah.
Rihanna. And
Yeah.
and I was just like, oh my God, I think I'm about to be asked to make a cake for Rihanna. And it was exactly that. They wanted to provide her with a cake to celebrate the year anniversary of her brand. And she was
Yeah.
actually living in London at the time. And I basically made an X shape cake. But
Mm.
it was still in my style. It had like rose gold drips, it had macarons, it had pink chocolate ruffles, I put flowers on it. It was actually a really beautiful cake. And I delivered it to this house. I obviously wasn't allowed to share the address with anyone. I wasn't allowed
Mm.
to post it until, in inverted commas, Rihanna was going to post it herself. So I think it took like 2 or 3 weeks of me literally waiting by my phone. And
Yeah.
then I was like, well, is she going to post it or not? That wasn't part of the contract because they can't really control. I don't think they can control what she can post. But what
Mm.
happened is, I think one of Rihanna's cousins or some relations uploaded a photo of her cutting into this cake on her story, and someone had screenshot it, and that photo started to circulate the internet. And then this
Mm.
is where I was like, okay, this is cool. Someone sent me that photo saying, is this your cake? because I
Yeah.
obviously have quite a distinct style. And I thought,
Yeah.
wow, the fact that someone, I think she was even in America, saw that photo of Rihanna cutting into this cake and go, oh, that's a Georgia cake. I'm like, yep,
Yeah.
I think I've made my mark in the industry now. um, so unfortunately, Rihanna didn't tag me, but I was obviously
Oh,
able to share the fact that I had made a cake for her, and just that, the honor of making a cake for Rihanna is. Who cares if she tagged me or not? Like, it would have been nice, but
well, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's just great that you were asked. And I mean, what fantastic timing for you to be utilizing Instagram just as that was kind of taking over and becoming what everyone was using as well. And before, it got sort of oversaturated too. I'm sure you would have found a way to make your mark, but just kind of, it's wonderful when all the kind of, everything falls into place like that. And
yeah,
obviously you have to think about all the hard work that is around all those kind of things falling into place, but it's just fantastic. And what a amazing journey you've had so far.
yeah, no, it's been a fun one.
That's good, that helps a lot. I'm sure. Speaking of making your mark and moving from being Georgia's Cakes to Georgia Green, you have recently published your first book, which is
I
very
have.
exciting. And I have luckily had a chance to look through a copy, and it's beautiful,
Thank
absolutely beautiful
you.
book. And I would just love to hear what that has been like for you, and kind of, how long it took, and what were some of the challenges, what surprised you about the process.
Yeah. I mean, I still can't believe I have a book, really. Like, I'm currently looking at a pile of them, and I'm like, I still can't believe my name is on there. Um, I suppose the process, I could say, was for the last 10 years. I think as soon as I started baking,
Mm,
I just had this like goal in mind. Oh, one day I'd love a book. At
yeah.
that point I didn't know what kind of book it would be, etc. But I looked up to all like the big names, the Mary Berry, Nigella, even Delia, and I'm just like, I want to be one of them. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
kind of the direction I want to be going in.
Oh, and I think a
And
book has a sort of sense of permanence, doesn't it? Like,
yes, very much so.
black and
And
white, my name on paper, kind of, that sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, and obviously times have changed, and I think books in general, not just cooking books, but books in general
Mm,
have changed in the whole market. But I really appreciate them. I think there's an artistry behind a book,
absolutely.
especially cooking or food related. So when it actually got more realistic, let's say, so I'd say about 4 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, I have an agent in London, James, who we've
Yeah.
worked together for the last five or 6 years, and
Hmm.
I said to him on our first meeting that I want to book out. It was one of my things, as well as paid partnerships on social media, etc. I want to book, and so it was kind of this casual chat with the people he knew about a book by Georgia. Now, what I had also, and I'll rush through this book, it's not so much part of the book process. But what I
Hmm.
have developed in the last few years isn't recipes. Funny enough,
Mm.
my cake recipe came from one of those recipes that was on the side of a flour pack. It is a standard. I call it a sponge cake recipe. People say, oh, it's a pound cake, it's a this cake.
Mm.
It's a equal amount flour, butter, sugar with 4 eggs kind of thing. But it's the
Yeah.
technique that I use, which I developed myself, and obviously how to adapt it. And I have all these certain tricks and things that I do. But the cake itself is a standard tasty cake, nothing too special.
Mm. Mm.
But it never fails. And I think that's the
Yeah.
idea. And so I didn't want to make a recipe book with 80 cake recipes, because I
Mm.
think firstly there's this idea of, if you find a good recipe and learn how to adapt it, that's enough. And
Mm.
secondly, it was about the decorating. And I think what's important to note is that there's, just within patisserie or baking, let's say, there are so many
Mhm.
different avenues, as with everything. Even with cakes,
Yeah.
there's different avenues. You can do more baked cakes, like a cheesecake or brownies, those kind of things, you can do the
Yeah.
fondant cake like we've already spoken about, or you can do decorated cakes of buttercream. And
Hmm.
over the last few years, obviously that's what I specialized in, and it has become the more popular thing. And I've yet to see, before my book, a book that really teaches you how to decorate cake. So any baking book out
Mm.
there may have cake designs in, but a lot of them just say, so put the buttercream on the cake, smooth it out until you're happy. And
Yeah.
and I have a whole chapter on how to smooth out buttercream. So just
Hmm.
anyways, so I know I'm jumping, but this idea of how to create beautiful cakes rather than a recipe book was kind of this idea that I was going down. It's what my YouTube's about. I guess it's what my Instagram is about, as well as the finished as well as the finished product. Can't speak. As well as the finished
It's okay.
product. It's how to, and also, like I mentioned at the beginning, I've been teaching for the last few years as well, and I
Mm.
teach the techniques, and it's all about the techniques. It's giving someone the skill of how to do this, and once you have all these
Mm.
skills, you can then find your own designs or find your own creativity within that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I said to James that I wanted this book, but it's not another baking book, like big letters, not another baking book. It's going to be a technique, step by step how to. So he started speaking with publishers, literacy agents, and everyone said the same thing. The baking book market is very saturated,
Yeah.
especially with the Bake Off. So the Bake Off, whoever wins the Bake Off obviously gets a book, and then they also do a Bake Off book, like from all the
Yeah.
recipes in the series. Then you have other people who necessarily haven't won, but who come from that. So it's very much
Mm.
dominated by a lot of these people, and also like you'll get all the Mary Berry books out, Nadia as well now. So
Hmm.
there's lots of baking books going on, and I just kept saying the same thing. I was like, but it's not a baking book. It's going to
Yeah.
be a step by step. Anyway, so that process of finding a publisher who was interested took 2 years.
Wow.
Funnily enough, when we got the agreement with Pavilion, it was actually in the middle of COVID, or like
Oh, wow.
coming out. So that's how long it actually took. And by then I had written a proposal, stressed 100 times that this isn't another recipe book. This is a step
Mm.
by step. I want it to be a masterclass. I want someone to be referring to this and like as a how-to book, as well
Yeah.
as being a beautiful book. I kind of went down I want it to be a coffee table book rather than a book that you have
Mm.
open in your kitchen that gets splatters of batter on it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, so just getting a publisher took some time. Obviously, it helped in those years. I grew my following even more. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. I
Mm.
think combined, I think I'm over 1 million now, which is
Wow.
crazy.
That is
Um,
crazy.
yeah, like I always think, like imagine all those people standing in front of you. That's a lot of people.
That'd be
Anyway,
terrifying.
yeah. Um, so they agreed. We signed with Pavilion, and what was amazing about the writing process, and I think it's very different to, I don't want to say the average baking book sounding in a negative way, but I mean the average baking book, um,
Mhm.
is I wasn't recipe testing. It's not like, okay, now I want to make
Yeah.
this sort of chocolate cake. Let's try out 10,000 different recipes.
Mm.
I knew my stuff. And so I just basically poured all my knowledge in my brain onto paper.
Mm.
And I think the only things which, look, it changed quite a few times as I was writing it, was how much to include, how much
Sure.
detail to go into. For example, like one of my signature decorations about 5 or 6 years ago was like a salted caramel popcorn. And then what
Yeah.
I actually started to realize is that the popcorn actually gets soft after a while.
Mm.
I think I may not even be using that in a few years, so let's not include that in the book, just as an
Sure.
example. Um, and obviously also leaving room for one day book number 2, 3, etc. Who knows?
Naturally.
um, but I just sat down and I was able to write it. And I think for me, that I can't remember the last time I had to sit down and write, probably school,
Mm.
because having done exams. And I had to, I think the process of me writing it was a few months rather than, I know you hear about people writing for years and years, especially recipe
Mm.
books with testing. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was, I think 5 to 6 months I had it written. And then it was, well, for me it was just natural. And I feel like, because
Mm.
like I said, I wanted this from day one. I was like, oh, finally. And it was like this release of putting it on paper. Well, on computer, obviously not writing it on paper.
Yeah.
But anyway, so had it done, and then I met with the design team, and I remember going to it started off with like a few Pinterest boards, who I like, what I don't like, and I very
Mm.
quickly said I like, the soft pastel feels, very warm,
Mm.
very welcoming. I know there's a big fashion at the moment for like that old school photography style, like with very harsh lighting and shadows. I don't know if you know what I'm
Oh,
referring
sure.
to,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like it's very stylistic, and I love looking at other people's work who does that, but like it's not me. I want it to
Yeah.
reflect me, my
Yeah.
brand, what I built up. And so they actually had a book which I ended up taking from them, of how to make paper flowers. And I
Mm.
loved the almost calmness of the book.
Mm.
I don't know if that makes sense. It's a joy to read, whether you're going to make the flowers or not.
Yeah.
And again, going back to like this idea, this isn't just for cake decorators. This is for people who like looking at pretty things.
Yeah.
um, anyway, so got my first draft in, and I think the only changes were um more like logistical things. I may have said vanilla pod once and vanilla paste, and changing that. But
Yeah. Sure.
in general, it was kind of quite quick from when I submitted the first draft to the final sign off. Um,
Mm.
and then we had a 9-day photography shoot straight. And the beauty of the
Wow.
book is like it's a journey. You start off with the
Mhm.
sponge and then the buttercream with fillings. Then you do the layering. Then you do the crumb coat. Then you do a smooth outer coat of buttercream. And then you get to the decorations and then designs. So
Mm.
on our shoots, we worked our way through the book. So again, it wasn't like this you had to squeeze 10 recipes in a day sort of thing. On day
Yeah.
one, we baked. Day two, we did the buttercream and the fillings. Then we actually managed to do a crumb coat as well. We were like really ahead of schedule. It was only that last day, obviously everyone's last day of a book is just like you have to get everything done there and
Yeah.
then,
Of course.
as well as the cover as well.
Mm.
That was the only day I think we started and finished at the time that was written. All the other days we all left early. They were like, God, this is easy. And I think it was I was buzzing the whole time. I remember
Mm.
Sam Harris, who photographed the book, his first image I think was me cutting paper for lining a tin, and I
Mm.
couldn't stop staring at this photo. It was just like the lighting, the quality. I'd never had this experience before, and I was just
Yeah.
upset. Like he took this photo of like just to test lighting of like literally a piping bag, and I was like, that is just the most beautiful photo
Oh.
of a piping, and it just continued, and then from the shoot, which was the end of August 2022, it was last year,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. No, sorry, was it last year?
It was
It
2022.
was that I did the shoot. Sorry, year before. Oh God, you know what? Now it's all one. No, 2022. Yes, sorry. 2022. I finished the shoot in August, and then it was like you have this 6 months of silence when it's gone to
Mm.
print. No, you do see the final pages digitally, and then you have this silence, and
Yeah.
then it was only in June, I think, I got my first hard copy, and then it officially published in the UK in July.
Wow.
So it's like a roller coaster of emotions,
Mm.
excitement, intense work, and then waiting. And I really enjoyed it. I think it was just an amazing experience. And like, I genuinely cried when I got my first copy because I think it had been such a intense and long process.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
it's just more than I can ever imagined it was, and the feedback has just been amazing.
Wonderful. Well, it's so, so lovely to hear how that all came about, and it sounds amazing. Sounds like a really good time, and it really is such a fantastic looking book, and you
Thank
know
you.
and I think that what is nice, and I kind of, we've kind of touched on what people can expect from the book. It's very much a cake decorating book, and not a recipe book, although there are recipes for the elements in there.
Yes.
um but what I took away from it is that I'm not a cake maker or a cake decorator. That's quite scary for me because I don't feel confident, but I do feel like with the style of your book that even someone like me could definitely create a cake that looked good. I think
Oh,
that it does the job. It definitely does the job. And I just wondered kind of, if there's anything specific you hope that people take away from your book.
yeah, I mean, I think exactly that. And I think as well, hmm, there's this, I think there's this idea that cake decorating, it is very accessible. Anyone can
Mm,
decorate a cake, anyone can bake a cake, but I think you can't ignore how difficult the the skill is.
mm,
And I think what I try and do is say every step of the way, it's okay if this happens.
mm.
It's okay if this happens. You can hide it with this, you could do this, you could try again next time. And that's what it's all about. And I think with social media, you can go on and see a time lapse or an edited photo or someone clicking, and a sponge cake becomes this beautiful 3-story wedding cake. And it's not that simple.
Yeah.
And I think what I've done in the book is really explain and separate every single step, and explain it as clearly as possible.
Mm,
So yes, if you're saying that you're not a baker, but actually maybe just try the simple sponge, see
mm,
how you get on, and then
mm.
maybe you can try making your own jam and see how that turns out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not like you have to bake this whole recipe and from start to finish.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
is in stages. um and also I've done 6 final designs in the book, and the first design is a naked cake, which is essentially a refined crumb coat with some
Mm.
flowers on, and like that's kind of the more accessible one. And I've already got people saying like, I've never baked a cake, I've used your book and also my tutorials online, and like I can't believe I've made this layered cake that's standing up. But I do think that you do need equipment, and
Yeah.
you do need to invest.
Mm,
And
mm.
there are some shortcuts you can take and others you can't. Like
Yeah.
if someone doesn't have a stand mixer, for example, which I
Mm.
know not everyone has, it's an expensive item, etc.
Yeah.
Um, you're probably not going to get to the same meringue consistency as you would with one. And it's
Sure.
up, like someone has to decide how important it is for them to do this seriously or not. And but for example, you don't need the most expensive cake boards or palette knives as long as
Yeah.
it's a relatively good shape. For example,
Mm,
I would say go metal over plastic.
mm.
But um, so yeah, that I just want people to not be afraid,
Yeah.
and for someone for all levels to appreciate the book, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a it's very accessible, very approachable, and I think that you know the imagery of the final designs that you've included make you want to make them.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah, I just think that's fabulous. I wish I want to try that. And probably, you know, it'll take a while to get to the point where you're doing all of the various different kind of decorations for the more detailed designs. But, you can get there with your book. That's
Yeah.
what's so lovely about it. Really good. Um, so what do you think is a highlight from your point of view from the book?
I think, oh, um, I think just it's for me, it's like just finally having what I had in mind down on
Yeah,
paper, and it's just I I had something in mind, but it's even more beautiful than what I had in mind.
that's good. Well,
uh,
when you exceed your own expectations, that's just
yeah,
wonderful.
I think it's that. I think the imagery is just amazing,
It's
and
beautiful.
I still look at it and I'm like, and like I know they're my cakes, and I don't want to be. I'm saying it because the whole style from the fonts that's been chosen,
Yeah,
and obviously I preferred certain fonts than others, but to put it together
yeah.
as and have it just presented the way it has been. I just
Mm,
like
mm.
I still flick through it. I've looked at it hundreds of times and I still get the same joy. I hope other people also get this joy, but I obviously think there's just this added thing that this is something that I have quite literally said I want this from day one.
Yeah,
Um, I think the cakes themselves, they came out really nicely on the shoot,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think what I've done is include quite a nice variation of designs,
Mm.
and I think also the added like highlight is when people send me their cakes that they've made using my book.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
I I think just those combined, it's just like everything I could have wished for and more.
brilliant. Yeah, that must be so lovely when people, have used the knowledge you've imparted and then are pleased and they show you what they've done. That must be like just a kind of real proud moment for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely. So I would love to know what's coming next for Georgia and her cakes.
Oh, well, um, I mean, my mind is always buzzing with ideas. But I think what you said at the very beginning is a book is it's a permanent thing. It's not
Mm.
like this book's out and you can't get it next year. And I
Yeah,
think how I've designed it and created the book is that it doesn't have a shelf life. And so I
absolutely.
think for the next at least year, if not more, I will be promoting the book. And that also involves traveling and meeting people. Um, it's not 100% confirmed. Well, it is on email, but no contracts have been signed. So I can't say where I've been invited to,
Sure.
but I I have been invited and I've accepted to travel, let's say halfway across the world, um,
Amazing.
to demonstrate in a big cake exhibition in, like, say, South America. That's
Oh,
a
wow.
broad enough area. And that's also something again that I always had in mind is to travel and meet all these people who have,
Mm.
whether they followed me from day one or have only just discovered my channel or have just seen my book in a shop, who knows. um, I think that's what the beauty is with the world we live in, is how small it is and connected. And yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's kind of, like I said, it's definitely not coming to an end, but it's to kind of appreciate what I've gone through in these last 10 years, from the day of walking into Cordon Bleu to having
Mm.
my book and demonstrating, and meeting people and signing books for people. Like, what? I think
Yeah.
that's just amazing, and
Yeah.
and hopefully more opportunities like that will be on their way. And I'm I'm a bit of a yes man. I say yes to opportunities, and I think, if it's just going to be a coffee with someone, you never know what's going to come from that coffee.
Sure,
And
sure.
so
Yeah.
I've got ideas in my head, and also I'm excited for things that I don't know that will come. That makes
Yeah.
sense as well.
Well, there's no rush. Your book just came out. So, you've
Yes.
got a bit of time to sort of ride that high for a while, um, of course. And, we are taking full advantage of your yes man nature. And we've invited you to come and do a demonstration here at the Cordon Bleu in London, which we're
Yeah.
recording sort of mid-September. And you'll be coming to join us on the 4th of October.
Yes, I can't wait
Um,
for that.
So either we had a wonderful time or we will have a wonderful time, depending on when this comes out.
I'm sure. No, and that's I think the craziest thing of all is that I'm actually going to the place where it all
I
started
know.
to teach. I'm going to be that chef that I was looking at behind with the mirrors. No, I can't wait.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting. And we really love love having alumni back to demonstrate to current students and just see what they can achieve, and and for the alumni to see how far they've come as well. It's just very exciting.
Yeah, I can't wait. And I love also seeing the alumni from the school as well, and seeing how different, or what different path everyone ends up
Yeah.
taking. And I think the beauty with this industry is that we're all our individual selves, and
Mm.
whatever we end up doing will, will succeed, we'll end up doing something totally different.
Mm.
And it just gives you this like lovely foundation to
Yeah,
develop your own character from. um
absolutely. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and we're so excited to welcome you here in a few weeks' time, and learn more about your wonderful book. And we'll include some links in our episode notes, just so where people can find you, where people can find the book, and so on. But Georgia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and can't wait to see you at the school soon.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Beyond Food and Wine, a Le Cordon Bleu podcast. Keep up to date with all our news and episodes by following us on social media or by signing up to our newsletter. Links are included in the episode notes. Until next time, à bientôt!